So behaviorism is a general theory of learning, but it was applied to language learning. And behaviorism sees language as a set of habits. So in the past, no learning theory specific to language learning existed. General theories on learning were applied to language learning, and that includes behaviorism. And this was popularized by B.F. Skinner. It was applied to language learning. Behaviorism sees language as a set of habits. A language is a set of habits according to behaviorism.
Behaviorism sees language.
And so everything about learning habits is applied to language learning. So everything about learning a habit is applied to behaviorism. Okay. Now before B.F. Skinner, there was Ivan Pavlov. You're probably very familiar with him. He was a predecessor of B.F. Skinner in what is called classic behaviorism. And this is his classic conditioning. In number one, before conditioning, food is offered to the dog again and again, but there's no tuning fork yet. So the dog salivates for the food, but after that, uh, the tuning fork is shown to the dog. The dog is made to hear the tuning fork, but there's no salivation. When the dog hears the tuning fork, there's no salivation. Hindi siya naglalaway. However, what Ivan Pavlov did was every time the food was offered to the dog, he would he would make the tuning fork sound. He would sound the tuning fork every time the food was offered to the dog. And so later on, the dog associated the tuning fork with food. And so when the tuning fork was sounded, the dog would salivate because he had associated it with food. That's a very classic way of conditioning, and it's very effective in many cases. It's applied even in commercials. You would see why on TV you'd see lots of ill-clad sexy women being shown on TV along with certain products. You would see a woman with a car, a sexy, ill-clad woman carrying a paint. The idea is to associate the product with sex. That's classic conditioning. In the case of credit cards, credit cards is not a good thing in my opinion. It causes people who have credit cards to overspend. But then what? How do banks advertise credit cards? They get a beautiful, fashionably dressed woman and let her carry a credit card. So the woman displays the credit card while, while she is fashionably dressed. So that's classical conditioning because the woman the audience the listeners associate the credit card with fashionable people. So classical conditioning is very powerful actually. Association is very powerful. It can influence our way of thinking. So we said that that behaviorism sees language as a set of habits, and habits are regularly associated responses to stimuli. They're not just associated; they are regularly associated responses to stimuli. So, for example, a child sees milk, that's the stimuli. She would say milk. That's her response. Or the child feels hungry. That's the stimulus. She would say milk to ask for milk. Okay. So habits are the result of stimulus response cycles. Habits are the result of repeated stimulus response cycles. So there's a lot of conditioning going on. And class, habits are observable. It's not concerned with internal mental processes. By the way, class, there's only 18 of you. So maybe you can wake up all your other classmates. So habits are observable. It's not concerned with internal mental processes. You don't care about what's happening inside the brain. Habits are also automatic. They are difficult to change. I'm sure you've experienced waking up early and then you prepare for school only to realize it's a Wednesday or it's a Saturday. So BF Skinner, applying behaviorism in language, published what is his book called Verbal Behavior in 1957. And Skinner called his conditioning operant conditioning. Again, operant conditioning, you've probably heard of that in your other classes. And so Skinner downplayed the stimulus because we don't really know which stimulus prompted a particular response. Okay, so we don't really know which stimulus prompted a particular response. And so Skinner downplayed the stimulus. What is important for Skinner is the response. According to Skinner's operant conditioning, the consequence after the response is what reinforces the habit. Reinforcement is more powerful than association. The result of what you do. Okay, there's a stimulus. What you respond, and you get feedback from people. So, for example, the stimulus is you're hungry. You say, "I want some food," and then uh, people give you food. So that reinforces your habit. Class, um, my classic example here is my niece. Food. Here is my niece. Food. My classic example here is my niece. My niece would keep on saying bad words, bad words, bad words, bad words, bad words. Why? Because she realized that when she when she speaks bad words, she immediately gets the attention of adults. So when my niece was very young, around 3 years old, she would say something and adults would not pay attention. But when she would say some bad word, she realized immediately the adults pay attention to her. So the response of the adults of paying attention to her immediately reinforced her habit of saying bad words, because she realized that saying bad words is a very effective way of getting adults' attention. The habit of saying bad words was reinforced by the fact that adults immediately pay attention to her. And so I told my relatives, whenever she says bad words, don't pay attention to her. Okay, so it's the consequence after the response is what reinforces the habit. Now, Skinner differentiates operants versus respondents. Operants are kinds of responses to stimuli that produce and therefore are governed by the consequences they produced. They produce consequences. Examples include sitting, walking, and dribbling a ball. Okay. Now, on the other hand, responses are elicited by identifiable stimuli. You laugh because you heard something funny. You have reflex actions because something happened. These are respondents. Okay. Now, number one in Skinner's operant conditioning is imitation. So, just like other habits, you imitate. Children imitate adults, and other adults learning something new imitate other adults. So, class, when we get back to face, I will demonstrate imitation and other activities. So please remind me to do that. We have we need I need to demo this to you. So imitation. Children imitate adults, other people imitate other people. Another one is reinforcement. So when you say something and people react to you, that's the feedback that you receive. Okay, my classic example here, class, is when I told a young lady, I'm going to sleep with you tonight. I learned the hard way. It's really the wrong thing to say. I'm already familiar with sleep with you, but I forgot about that. When I was in UP Los Baños studying college, our organization had visitors, women visitors, uh, and they were staying in a house that's a little bit far from the campus, from the main campus, and there was some security concerns. So I was sent to sleep in the same house. They would sleep upstairs. I would sleep in the first floor of the house. The problem was when I spoke with them, I told one of the girls there. I said, "I'm going to sleep with you tonight." And she was flustered. She was embarrassed. And I realized, oh, sorry, that's the wrong thing to say. And that was negative reinforcement. And so from that day on, I I kept bearing in my mind not to say sleep with you, rather sleep in the same house. So that was very funny for me, but also embarrassing. Now, I also had a friend who was from Batangas, and he attended a camp. a youth camp, and some people say, some young women would say, he had an admirable accent, and so he would, after that, he would keep on emphasizing his Batangas accent. In the case of children, when they use language to ask for something, they get what they want. So they realize that they can use language to influence people and get what they want. On the other hand, of course, if they mispronounce something, they get laughed at. That's negative reinforcement. Also in school, of course, the teacher corrects students. That's a form of negative reinforcement when they speak something or say something wrong. However, Skinner said in Skinner's operant conditioning that no punishment should be given without positively reinforcing alternate behavior. So if somebody says something wrong, he or she should be asked to say something right and reinforce that something right. That's right. Okay. In first language learning, children imitate utterances. So this is very familiar to you most likely. You see your nephews and nieces imitating the utterances spoken by adults. Maybe even when they hear adults cursing, they also try to imitate. Okay? So, children are rewarded or corrected in their speech. The reward or correction is the reinforcement. The reward is the positive reinforcement, the correction is the negative reinforcement. So, for example, Johnny has no Coke. And so Johnny asks for Coke. Can I have some Coke, please? And then after that, Johnny has Coke. And so he gets what he wants. And so he realizes that he can use language to get what he wants. And so that reinforces his language. Actually, second language learning among adults proceeds the same way. Second language learners also imitate utterances, and those second language learners also get rewarded or corrected. They get rewarded in the form of getting what they want or being able to see that they're able to express themselves, or they get corrected. That's the reinforcement that they get. So both children learning their first language and adults learning a second language have the same way. They proceed the same way. The language learning for them proceeds the same way. That's according to behaviorism. Now, according to behaviorism, language learning is most successful when language tasks are broken down into individual stimulus response links, which could be practiced and mastered. So, for example, there's a word on the board and you read. The stimulus is the word on the board. Your response is you pronounce it, you speak the word, you pronounce the word, and you get either appreciated or corrected. So, you have stimulus, response, and reinforcement. According to behaviorism, language learning is most successful when language tasks are broken down into individual stimulus response links, which could be practiced and mastered. We now go to errors. Of course, when people learn, particularly learning a language, they commit errors. How does behaviorism view errors? According to behaviorism, errors are the result of interference. Interference. The language programmed into your mind, meaning the old habits, they interfere with learning the new language, the new habits of the language programmed into your mind. So, what do? You need to get rid of the old habits in order to learn the new habits. First, language interference. In the case of language interference, is a result of what is called proactive inhibition. And first, language interference produces errors. So here's my classic example for this one: tennis players and badminton players. So many Americans, they play tennis in the United States. And in tennis class, you rely on the strength of your arm. Again, you in tennis you rely on the strength of your arm. However, when Americans come here in the Philippines and they play badminton, they still use the strength of your arm. When in fact, in badminton, you don't rely on the strength of your arm, you rely on the strength of your wrist. Tennis, strength of the arm; badminton, strength of the wrist. So when you play badminton using the strength of your arm, you're doing it wrong. In order to learn badminton, you need to get rid of the old habit of relying on your arm and acquire the new habit of relying on your wrist. So you get rid of the habit of relying on your arm as you did in tennis, and in playing badminton you rely on your wrist, on the strength of your wrist. So you get rid of the old habit and you acquire the new habit. Okay? Errors are the habits you previously learned, and they prevent you from learning new habits. The habits you previously learned prevents you from learning new habits. And as I said, the language program into your mind interfere with learning the new language, because the language program into your mind are old habits and they interfere with learning the new language, the new habits of the new language. That's why it's called first language interference. So this is what is called proactive inhibition. So what happens in proactive inhibition is you have the meaning, but instead of being able to express it using the structures of the second language, you express it using the structures of the first language. You have meaning, instead of expressing it using the structures and habits of the second language, you end up expressing it using the structure and habits of the first language. That's proactive inhibition. So, for example, in French, when French people try to learn English, j'ai Freud, that literally means I have cold. J'ai Freud, j'ai Freud, literally means I have cold. So, when they try to speak in English, they say I have cold instead of I am cold. So they try to express meaning in English, but the habit of French, the structures and habit of French interfere in the way. And so that is called proactive inhibition. That's in French. Though these are French learners of English. So again, in French, there are structures that are different from English, and instead of getting rid of the old habit, the French learners rely on that old habit instead of acquiring the new habit. On the other hand, in German, it's the same thing. Ich bin kalt means I am cold, literally. And so because English and German are the same in this aspect, the habits are the same. The habits are the same. The structures are the same. The habits are the same. So there's no proactive inhibition. For for Filipino, giniginaw ako literally means cold me. Okay, cold me. That's the literal meaning. And if you rely on the old habits of Tagalog, you would say in English, cold me, instead of saying I am cold. Okay, that's proactive inhibition. And habits would get transferred to the new language, and that's interference. So transfer of habits will take place from the first language to the second language. And where the first language is different from the second language, errors will result. But where the first language is similar to the second language, easy and rapid learning will result. That's according to behaviorism. Again, transfer of habits will take place from the first language to the second language, and in grammatical structures where the first language is different from the second language, errors will result. But where the first language is similar to the second language, easy and rapid learning will result. So the example of the first language not being similar to the second language is French and Tagalog. And where the first language is similar to the second language, our example is German. Okay, so according to behaviorism, errors are undesirable. They must be avoided. Just like your PE teacher tells you, you should try to do it perfectly. And according to behaviorism, errors are evidence of non learning, not wrong learning. Because wrong learning is not learning. Okay, so errors are evidence of non learning. And errors might become habits if they're uncorrected. So in behaviorism, you immediately correct errors. Errors, correct them immediately. Errors, you correct them immediately. Now, you as the teacher, you need to be proactive enough to predict where the errors will occur. And areas of potential error is the concern of contrastive analysis, hypothesis, which we will study later, not today. So you as the teacher, you need to anticipate where the errors would happen, prepare for them. So how do you know? How do you anticipate? Well, you study contrastive analysis hypothesis. You study the differences between the two languages. And the errors will probably happen where the two languages are different. Okay? Class, behaviorism spawned a teaching approach called audiolingualism. So audiolingualism is the teaching approach based on behaviorism. And audiolingualism uses imitation, practice, and reinforcement. Like, class, repeat after me. And then let's practice. Everybody will do something like that. And class, we will do this when we do face to face. We'll have imitation, practice, and reinforcement. So, class, actually, these ideas of behaviorism, these have been largely debunked, particularly in grammar, except for pronunciation. Again, the ideas in behaviorism have been largely debunked, except in the case of pronunciation. Okay, so behaviorism and audiolingualism is the ideas of behaviorism and audiolingualism are still very true in the aspect of pronunciation. So, in conclusion, since language is a set of habits, it follows the same rules of general habit formation. Okay, thank you very much, class. What will happen is we will have a 10-minute break and we will go on with part one of acculturation. So we will have a 10-minute break, then we will go on with acculturation. Part one of acculturation. So we had a memo from the admin that we should do synchronous. Actually, class, the admin is no longer in favor of having asynchronous meetings. The admin told the faculty that as much as possible, we should do synchronous. But it's okay if you were unable to attend. It's good that you were able to attend now. So for those of you who failed to get the first part, you can just go back to the live, to the replay of the live. That's what I like about YouTube. There's immediate uh, review. You don't need to wait for the recording. In many terms ago, I would have to send resend the recording, and if you miss something, you cannot go back to it. You have to wait for the recording. But in YouTube Live, if you miss something, you just turn back the line. So right after this, you can go back to the video. You don't need me to resend the recording. Okay, so class, see you at 8:27.